And Nathan Rothschild said sometime after the Battle of Waterloo, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire upon which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." And Nathan Rothschild took control of the British money supply in that 48 hours between the time that he found out that Napoleon had lost the Battle of Waterloo to the time that the British public had found out. And in the meantime he went down to the Royal Exchange and stood by his pillar and began selling the government bonds that he had, and that created a crash in the bond market. And by the time the public and the British government found out that they had won the Battle of Waterloo, he was already buying up the bonds at a discounted price, and so that amassed a huge amount of wealth for the Rothschilds in London. And by the end of the 19th century, the Rothschilds virtually controlled all the money supply throughout Europe and were the equivalent of the International Monetary Fund today.
Throughout the next decades, whenever a European government collapsed and was replaced, it was the Rothschilds who were first in line to provide loans. The loaning business was immensely successful. The Paris branch, for example, grew from the equivalent of $5 million in 1820 to over $500 million in 1850. In essence, the 5 Rothschild banking families back then provided the same service that the International Monetary Fund provides today. They stabilized major currencies and provided loans to governments, doing both at a great profit.
And so after the Napoleonic Wars finished, there was major change within those nations that participated, namely England, France, Holland and Germany, and they all owed a lot of money to the Rothschilds and friends for financing those wars. But that wasn't the end of it, because we know that in 1806 Nathan Rothschild, when he received the wealth of King Wilhelm in London, he put £3,000 of gold into the East India Company. And so this combination of war and profits and debt continued as they conquered India, and then they took the opium from India to China, and that created the Opium Wars. And by the time that Nathan Rothschild died in 1836, we know that the Opium Wars were just about to begin. But it wasn't just conquest and war and finance that they were making money out of, but they also wanted to own the gold and the diamonds and the wealth in the world. And so let's have a look now at the expansion of the industry that the Rothschilds controlled.
Of course, throughout the 19th century, the 5 branches also made many private investments beyond their government loans. In 1868, they purchased one of the most valuable wine estates in France. In 1875, they acquired a minority stake in the Suez Canal from Egypt, while in 1883, they funded the development of the first major oil well in the Old World, challenging the Rockefeller monopoly in America. They also became majority shareholders in the diamond monopoly of De Beers and in Rio Tinto, one of the world's largest mining companies.
Both Rio Tinto and De Beers became major mining companies for gold and diamonds in South Africa and Rhodesia after the Boer War, which took place at the turn of the 20th century. And we know that the Rothschilds funded the Boer War and that their agents were Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner from the City of London. And when you look at South Africa and Rhodesia today, you'd have to say that both of those nations have been looted and left abandoned by the Rothschilds. And meanwhile, back in Europe, we know that the Rothschilds were building mansions outside Paris, for example. And we see there the Chateau de Ferrières, and also in Venice and Frankfurt. And meanwhile, back in Buckinghamshire, the wealth of the Rothschilds was showing there by the mansions that they built. And for example, there in the 1850s, we know that Baron Mayer Amshelty Rothschild built Mentmore Towers. And he was also known as the High Sheriff of Buckinghamshire. He also bought nearby Ascot House, which after a while he sold to Leopold de Rothschild. And in the 1880s, we know that Lionel's son Alfred built Halton House. And also Ferdinand built a place there in Wadston. So let's have a look now at the house at Wadston.
Waddesdon is a phenomenon in lots of ways. I mean, who would expect to find a French chateau in the middle of the English countryside? And it's very much the vision of one man, Baron Ferdinand de Rothschild, who acquired the estate in 1874 and set about creating a place in the country where he could bring friends and family to entertain them at weekends. And so Waddesdon really sprung from that. But he chose Buckinghamshire because he knew the county very well. Other members of his family had already started to build the most extraordinary houses in the vicinity. In fact, Buckinghamshire was often referred to as Rothschildshire in the 19th century because so many members of the family lived here.
It was an extraordinary phenomenon because the Rothschild family, having made a lot of money in the 19th century and having come from the ghetto in Frankfurt with nothing, decided to build on a huge scale throughout Europe. Most of those houses have now gone. Waddesdon remains as the one with its collections intact, in fact growing.
One of the really astonishing things about this house is that Ferdinand began from scratch. There was nothing on this bare hill when he started out, and the house was assembled and the grounds all around it in an astonishingly short space of time.
Ferdinand held his first house party in May 1880, 6 years after he'd bought the estate from the Duke of Marlborough. Waddesdon was renowned for the quality of the hospitality and the entertainment that was given. Ferdinand's guests came from all walks of life, but the real pinnacle was his royal visitors, Queen Victoria and the Prince of Wales, who visited on numerous occasions.
And so the reason that Waddesdon looks like a French chateau in the middle of Buckinghamshire was because Ferdinand built it, and he was the son of the French branch of the family. He was the son of James de Rothschild, who was the wealthiest banker in Europe, and he built just outside Paris Le Château de Ferrières. And we know that there in Buckinghamshire the Rothschild family began to grow in strength, and they even had their own private army called the Buckinghamshire Yeomanry. Lionel de Rothschild was born in London and was the son of Nathan Mayer Rothschild. In 1838, soon after Queen Victoria came to the throne, he became Baron Lionel de Rothschild. Lionel became the first sitting member of the House of Commons representing the City of London, reporting back to the City of London Corporation. Lionel was in office for nearly 27 years between 1847 and 1874. Here is a painting of Lionel being introduced into the House of Commons to take his seat, but he refused to swear on the Christian Bible and asked for only the Old Testament. This was permitted, but when he omitted the words of the oath upon the truth faith of a Christian, he was required to leave. However, eventually in 1858, as this painting shows, Lionel was allowed into Parliament after taking an oath with his head covered in the Jewish tradition, and he said, "So help me Jehovah," instead. Lionel married his first cousin, Charlotte de Rothschild, who was the daughter of his uncle Karl Mayer Rothschild from Naples. The Rothschild branch in Naples closed in 1863, soon after Karl's death. Lionel's son Nathaniel Mayer Rothschild, also known as Baron Nathan de Rothschild, became in his youth the captain of the Buckinghamshire Yeomanry. His volunteer army was in fact the Rothschild private army within Great Britain. Nathan was also known as the Lord Lieutenant of Buckinghamshire. He was educated at Trinity College, Cambridge. He worked as a partner in the London branch of the family bank, N.M. Rothschilds and Sons, and became head of the bank after his father Lionel's death in 1879. Baron Rothschild financed the governments of America, Russia and Austria, as well as Great Britain. Nathan de Rothschild also financed the British takeover of the Suez Canal in Egypt through his friend Jewish Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, and took a share for himself. Like his father, he became a member of Parliament, but not for the City of London this time, but for Aylesbury and Buckinghamshire between 1889 and 1915. He is also known as Baron Nathan de Rothschild and was elevated to the House of Lords, becoming the first Jewish member of the House of Lords. But it was Nathan's son, Walter de Rothschild, who became the first Jewish peer in England at the beginning of the 20th century. The Buckinghamshire Yeomanry was created to protect the Rothschild power base in the City of London, but then they became the undergirding force of the Imperial Yeomanry Army.
October 1899, Britain went off to war to beat the Boers and secure South Africa for the Empire. There were polo sticks and crates of champagne in the hold. They thought it would be over by Christmas.